Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jackie Lizer, and I'm a manager with the CAQH CORE team. I'd like to welcome you all to today's CAQH CORE Recertification webinar and to thank you for joining us today. I'll go ahead and get things started with a run-through of our agenda. We're going to start today with a brief overview of CAQH CORE, followed by a quick overview of CORE certification. We'll then take a deeper dive into recertification and discuss the step-by-step recertification process and timeline. At the end, we should have a few minutes for some audience questions. Looking at our next slide, I'd like to quickly run through just a few logistics for the webinar today. If you'd like to download the slides, you can access them now in the handout section of your GoToWebinar menu. That's on the right-hand side of your screen. The slides, along with the recording of today's session, will also be available on our events page after the webinar, and it will also be emailed to all attendees and registrants in the next 1 to 2 business days. If you have any questions, you're encouraged to submit them throughout the presentation. You can do so at any time by using that questions panel on your GoToWebinar menu. With that, I'll hand things over to Taha Anjarwala, Associate Director on the CORE team, who will start with a brief overview of CAQH CORE.
Thanks, Jackie. So on the next slide, CAQH CORE, CAQH stands for Council for Affordable Quality in Healthcare, and CORE, which stands for Committee on Operating Rules and Exchanges, is an industry-led multi-stakeholder initiative that drives the creation and adoption of healthcare operating rules that support standards, accelerates interoperability, and works to align administrative and clinical systems between stakeholders. CORE is designated by the Department of Health and Human Services as the National Operating Rule Authoring Entity for HIPAA-covered administrative transactions, and we work to execute our rule development activities through launching various work groups on priority topics identified by our members, and some of those include items like prior authorization, attachments, and value-based payments. And looking at the image on the right-hand slide, this image illustrates CORE's model for operating rule development, which really takes a holistic and integrated approach. Starting from a staged process of identifying industry needs and gaps, involves in-depth research on potential rule areas, to bringing industry minds together in collaboration, developing and voting on the requirements that go into the operating rules. CORE then promotes operating rules by building awareness through education and implementation efforts, and CORE also offers a certification program for organizations to further drive adoption and test and demonstrate compliance where adoption can be tracked. And we'll be diving more in detail about recertification, which is a component of the CORE certification program in today's webinar. And lastly, we continue to monitor industry needs for future rule development areas and request updates for existing rules, and that cycle kind of repeats of that integrated model. So on the next slide, I'll kind of briefly just provide an overview of certification and in the engagement that we have with the industry. So on the next slide, so CORE has been developing operating rules for more than 15 years now, and as of today, we have more than 120 organizations that have certified and have engaged with us on various topics that really help to demonstrate their commitment to streamlining healthcare transactions across the revenue cycle. As you can see, there's broad engagement from the industry with representation from commercial plans, Medicaids, large health systems, electronic EMR vendors and practice management systems, federal agencies. So you can see there's lots of different, really a multi-stakeholder level of engagement on the certification program. So on the next slide, I'll briefly talk about the certification program at a high level. So CORE began developing operating rules in 2005, and then 2007 we launched the certification program, really trying to provide an avenue for operating rule implementers to validate and demonstrate that their systems are in conformance with the rules. The certification program was developed by industry for industry through a transparent multi-stakeholder process, which is the same process that our operating rules go through in that development cycle. CORE certification offers stakeholders opportunity for cost savings, industry recognition, and market advantage, for those that exchange the various administrative healthcare information. The CORE certification program is also designed to ensure that IT systems and products are aligned with the federally recognized and industry-developed operating rules and underlying standards that they support. Currently, certification is available across 7 sets of published operating rules that include transactions and business processes such as eligibility, claims, claim status, healthcare payments, prior authorization, and certification testing is a key component of the certification program, which not only requires adherence at a policy level, but actually requires organizations to validate conformance via transaction-based and connectivity-based testing through a third-party testing vendor. And we'll have more details on those testing requirements as they pertain to recertification later in this presentation. So these elements are the foundation as to why the CORE certification program, is the gold standard in the industry, and the value that CORE seal gives confidence to organizations that have gone through this industry-driven, comprehensive, and non-biased independent process to ensure adherence to both not only operating rules but the standards that they support. So just wanted to provide a level set on and shape the webinar for and provide an overview of the certification program. And I know the focus for today's conversation is recertification, so I'll pass the call over to Adam Nichols to kind of talk about recertification process, what that looks like, and what are the next steps there. So over to you, Adam.
Thanks, Taha. Today, I'd like to just, as Taha said, provide an overview of the CORE certifications, programs, process, and level of effort it takes for an organization to achieve CORE certification. Next slide, please. So recertification is an important certification component added in 2020 that ensures there is ongoing conformance to the operating rules over time as technology evolves and the market conditions change. This is important especially as operating rule compliance is being enforced by the federal government and certification is being required for health plan contracts. So we believe that with evolving technology, mergers, acquisitions, and system upgrades, there's really a need to assess the ongoing conformance with the operating rules to maintain program integrity. Further, recertification enables organizations to align with healthcare needs for operating rules when the rule requirements are updated over time. And looking at the next slide. In terms of timelines, CORE certified entities will be required to recertify every 3 years. These renewals may occur anytime during the calendar year based off of the initial year of the CORE certification. So after communicating intent to recertify, organizations' testing must be completed within 180 days. If there is a lapse in renewing certification, CAQH will proceed with decertification. Any updates to the CAQH CORE operating rules will be incorporated within the certification process at a minimum. Entities must implement the versions of the operating rules that have been published 24 months to the CORE certification seal renewal date. Meaning as organizations approach their recertification dates, they must consider and evaluate if they need to implement new or updated operating rule requirements in order to recertify. Certification is now required. So if your organization was issued an initial certification prior to 2016, you must recertify by the end of this year to keep your certification active. The cost of recertification is half of the initial CORE certification fee. So if you are a CORE certified organization, feel free to contact us if you're unsure on when you need to recertify by. So looking at the next slide, I'd like to now dive into the step-by-step components of the CORE recertification process and testing. The 6 components are reassessing the rules, performing analysis, engaging resources and trading partners, remediating product systems and applications, performing recertification testing, and finalizing the CORE certification process. On average, it takes between 3 to 6 months to complete the CORE certification process from end to end. However, we have seen organizations complete the process in a few weeks' time. The completion time also depends on the number of dedicated resources an organization uses towards recertification. Next slide. So as illustrated on this slide, there are currently 7 different operating rule transaction sets that organizations can recertify on. You can also see the regulatory adoption status of each as either mandatory or voluntary. So CORE transitioned the operating rule sets from a phase-based approach to a transaction-based approach, bundling data content, infrastructure, and connectivity under each transaction, making it a little easier for organizations to recertify as it isolates testing by the transaction type. So organizations should begin the recertification process by reviewing updated to these operating rule requirements since they were last certified. Looking at the next slide, so under the performing analysis, or really the second component, during the pre-recertification and system evaluation, organizations should review and understand the requirements of the operating rules and the scope resources needed to adopt and implement the rules. A very important resource that CAQH CORE offers is the Analysis and Planning Guide. There is a separate guide for each transaction, and we offer these for every operating rule set available for recertification, as outlined on the previous slide. These guides have separate tools within, offering both quick assessment and drill down options. So you can do with a simple checks, yes or no, to validate whether a general operating rule applies, such as, does my organization conduct real-time or batch? Or you can use a drill down tool where you can check operating rule requirements line by line to determine whether they apply, and if yes, is it a business or technical impact? The drill down tool also prescribes remediation strategies such as making a software change, business process change, or even flagging an education or communication opportunity where you may need to engage with another department within your organization or possibly a trading partner. This tool helps you map touch points between systems and business processes to streamline implementation of the operating rules. Looking at the next slide. So after completing the internal assessment, you will need to submit a CORE Recertification Seal application form. This signifies that you are prepared to recertify on the operating rule sets and commit resources to pursue recertification. Organizations will have about 180 days to complete testing for recertification after submitting the CORE Recertification application form. Note that the recertification fee is half the initial cost of certification, and it is based on an organization type and revenue. And so looking at the next slide, on the fourth part, remediating the product and systems and applications, when looking to remediate your product or solution in preparation for CORE recertification, there are many free and accessible tools available to you. In addition to the Analysis and Planning Guide, CAQH CORE offers other tools that can be found on the CAQH CORE certification process page, such as the CAQH CORE Master Test Suite, which are transaction-specific documents that specify the test scripts that must be met in the recertification testing, and Master Testbed Data, which is dummy data that would be used to load within the recertification testing. So if any questions arise when looking to understand the CAQH CORE operating rules, the CAQH CORE certification team is always happy to set up a call. And on the next slide would be the fifth step in the process, performing the recertification testing. So after an organization really resolves any gaps identified in preparation for the CORE recertification testing, they should proceed to create a testing account with a CAQH CORE authorized testing vendor. Once a CORE certification testing account has been created, the CORE team can walk the organization through navigating the test site. And on the next slide, further performing the recertification testing. So we look at this slide, there are three different types of testing components CORE recertification testing applies to. It's transaction-based testing tasks, uploading documentation, and attestation-based tasks. So with transaction-based tasks, they involve setting up a connection with our authorized CAQH CORE third-party testing vendor and testing for the transactions associated with the operating rule set for which you are pursuing. The second type of testing task that you'll run into is uploading documentation, which requires that the organization upload appropriate documentation applicable to the operating roles. Examples include companion guides, communication log files, and notices of any regularly scheduled downtimes. And finally, attestation-based tasks involve attesting for current or planned conformance to the operating roles for which they are testing. And looking at the next slide, still within the performing recertification testing, when testing for core recertification, there may be certain testing tasks that are not applicable to your business. If a task does not apply to your business, you can add an explanation as to why did this task would be out of scope for your business within the notes and comments section of the specified task. In this example, an organization would be using username and password authentication for their product or solution and would need to indicate that the X.509 digital certificate authentication is out of scope for their business. There are a variety of other out of scope testing tasks depending on your organization as well. So looking at the next slide and finalizing the core recertification process, once an organization has successfully completed the core recertification testing, a HIPAA attestation form must be submitted for each of the operating rule sets tested. All organizations that operate under the CAQH CORE operating rules are assumed to be HIPAA compliant. Organizations pursuing recertification on the operating rules will be asked to attest to this fact when completing and signing a HIPAA attestation form. And so looking at the next slide, last but not least, based on when you last completed core certification, take note of the illustration on this slide for when your organization is required to recertify. For example, if your last core certification was completed in 2016 or earlier, you're required to recertify by the end of 2022. These timeframes are really set to ensure certifications are the first to become updated by balancing resource requirements. Again, recertification is required every 3 years for your organization. If your organization is due for recertification by the end of 2022, please reach out to CORE and send over a CORE recertification seal application. Also, please reach out to us if you have any questions regarding next steps. I'll now hand the call over to Jackie. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam, for that overview. I'm taking a look at our questions panel, and we don't have any questions that were submitted yet, but we do have some time to take any questions from the audience. So just a reminder, if you have a question for Taha or Adam, please feel free to submit them right now in that questions panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll leave it open for a few minutes before we close out. And while we wait for any potential questions to come through, Taha or Adam, do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the audience? Or any recommendations? Yep.
So one thing that we could do, especially for those that are, going through the recertification process or have any questions, we'd be more than happy to set up a one-on-one call to kind of walk you through kind of, your initial certification where you were a couple of years ago to where you are now, and kind of walk you through the changes, changes to any potential changes to the rules, what the impacts may be, how that may impact certification, and what the process is. And additionally, as Adam mentioned, some of the testing process, from a recertification testing perspective, a lot of the testing tasks we've reduced the number of tasks, so we would also be happy to provide you an overview and detail on kind of the applicability of recertification testing, so you have an understanding there.
Thank you for that, Tom.
We have a few questions that have come in, so I'm going to go ahead and ask the first one. And the first one is, what has CORE seen from organizations during recertification? Are there any specific rules that fail during recertification since being passed previously during their initial certification?
Sure, I can take this one. So one of the rules, I guess, that organizations probably have the most challenge with is around our connectivity rules, because we've and so and connectivity is kind of the baseline for establishing testing. So if you can and what's happened was during initial certification, we had requirements around SOAP and MIME, and a lot of organizations 10 years ago chose MIME-based testing, and now for recertification we're transitioning to more SOAP-based technology, just because as the rules and new rules that CORE has written are moving in that direction. So some organizations have had challenges with that.
Great, thanks, Taha. And another question came through about the new connectivity rule. If you are getting recertified in 2023, would that require you to certify in the new version 4 of that connectivity rule?
Yes. So as part of our recertification efforts, for any of the operating rules that currently require version 4, so yes. So the short answer to the question is yes, but we probably would need to do a deep dive on which rule sets that you're actually being recertified for to get a good understanding to see if version 4 would apply or not.
Great,
so we can follow up with that poster on that question.
Perfect. Thanks, Taha. And we do have a question about fees. Sarah, would you mind going back a few slides? I know that we have the fee schedule available. And we can just put it right here. Yep, quickly. So the fee recertification cost is half of the original cost of certification. And you can see the breakdown here on the right-hand side of the slide. It varies by stakeholder type and annual revenue. But we can also answer any specific questions you have if you email core@caqh.org about cost.
Yes, and to add to that point, Jackie, as well, there is no cost for state or government entities when it comes to the CORE recertification process. So just wanted to note that as well towards the bottom.
Great, thanks, Adam. All right, I haven't seen other, oh wait, nope, we just got one more question. Is it still correct that participating organizations do not have to pay? The participation fee is separate from the certification fee. So certification is not included in CORE participation.
And Jackie, to add, I believe if your organization is a CAQH member organization, so broader than CORE, then the participation fee is waived if your organization is one of the founding members of CAQH.
Oh yeah, thank you for that clarification, Taha. Great. All right, I think with that we can wrap up a few minutes early. If you had any other questions sneak through, we can go ahead and we'll take a look at those once the webinar wraps up, and we can email you any answers. But feel free to contact us again at core@caqh.org if you have any questions about recertification or want to get the process started. And with that, I hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you, everyone.